Welcome back to our channel. Think all quarters are just 25 cents? Think again. Like and subscribe to learn which ones are secretly valuable today. In 1974, America was navigating turbulent waters. The nation was still entangled in the aftermath of the Vietnam War, the Watergate scandal was unraveling public trust, and inflation gripped everyday life with silent persistence. It was a year of transition, confusion, and underlying tension. Yet, amid the political storms and social reckonings, the machinery at the United States Mint continued to hum. Millions of coins were being produced daily to keep commerce moving, including the familiar and dependable Washington quarter. Little did anyone know, a small number of these 1974 quarters would later become one of the most baffling and desirable coin mysteries of the modern era. The Washington quarter had, by then, become an iconic presence in the pockets of Americans. Since its debut in 1932, it had remained mostly unchanged in appearance. The obverse featured George Washington's stoic profile, while the reverse depicted a heraldic eagle, wings outstretched, perched on a bundle of arrows, with olive branches just below. These symbols of strength and peace had become so ordinary that few paid them any attention. Minted in both Philadelphia and Denver, the 1974 quarters were composed of a copper-nickel clad, introduced in 1965 to replace the 90% silver content due to rising metal costs. By the time 1974 rolled around, this clad composition had been in use for nearly a decade. Each coin had a copper core sandwiched between layers of nickel, producing a familiar silvery surface with a hint of copper showing along the edge. The standard weight was 5.67 grams. Billions of these were struck that year, most lost to circulation, unremarkable and indistinct. Most, but not all, the mystery began decades later when an amateur coin collector named Franklin Barrett was inspecting a lot of circulated 1970s quarters he'd purchased from a retired vending machine operator in Arizona. Franklin, an engineer by profession, had a sharp eye for anomalies. He wasn't a treasure hunter in the traditional sense, but someone who enjoyed the chase of precision and the occasional thrill of discovery. One quarter stood out to him immediately, not for any glaring flaw, but because it felt different in his hand. The weight was the first thing he noticed. It seemed heavier. He verified it using a digital scale, 6.19 grams. That was significantly over the expected weight. The edge looked different, too. There was no visible copper core, just a consistent silvery tone all the way around. That struck Franklin as odd. He suspected it might be an old silver coin mistakenly mixed in, perhaps a 1964 quarter that was misdated, or an altered piece. But when he closely examined the date, 1974, he realized he had something that should not exist. That he submitted the coin to a well-known grading service. The results came back with stunning clarity. 1974 Washington quarter struck on a 90% silver planchet. It wasn't an altered coin. It wasn't tampered with. It had been struck on a blank that hadn't been used for nearly a decade. How that silver planchet ended up in the minting presses in 1974 was a question no one could definitively answer. Theories began to circulate. Some believed that leftover silver blanks from the early 1960s had accidentally remained in the storage bins and were mistakenly fed into the presses. Others speculated that the mint may have performed test strikes on silver planchets for internal purposes, and one or two might have slipped into general production unnoticed. No official explanation emerged from the U.S. Mint. The coin's existence was real, its condition verified, and its error genuine. But its origin remained a mystery. Franklin's coin, graded -58 Australian dollars with brilliant luster and minimal wear, quickly attracted attention from collectors and dealers across the country. At a private auction in 2006, it sold for $63,000 to a prominent West Coast numismatist. The price stunned the community and ignited a race to find other examples. A year later, another surfaced, this time from an estate sale in Indiana. This second coin had resided quietly in a box of unsorted change belonging to a coin hoarder who had passed away in the 1990s. When his grandchildren finally got around to sorting through his belongings, they discovered a few rolls of old quarters, one of which included a surprisingly heavy 1974 quarter. It, too, was sent for testing and confirmed to have been struck on a silver planchet. This second specimen was in slightly better condition, graded MS-61, and sold at a national coin show for $72,000. With 2 verified examples in circulation, the myth transformed into reality. Collectors began scrutinizing 1974 quarters with renewed intensity, hunting for weight anomalies, edge inconsistencies, or surface luster that seemed out of place. A third coin was found in 2010, but this one bore an even more peculiar twist. It had a double die obverse. The doubling was subtle, limited primarily to the word Liberty and Washington's I, but combined with the silver planchet, it formed a remarkable hybrid of rarity. Graded MS-63, this dual-error piece fetched $96,000 in a high-profile auction, breaking previous records and reigniting interest in modern minting anomalies. By this point, the 1974 silver planchet quarter was no longer just a curiosity, it had become a legend in the numismatic world. Its rarity was obvious, but its unpredictability gave it an almost mystical aura. It wasn't just that the coins were rare, it was that their existence contradicted everything believed about the mint's processes in that era. Adding another layer to the intrigue, a collector in Texas claimed to possess a 4th example in 2017, one allegedly found in a roll of quarters picked up from a local bank. However, this one was different. It appeared to have been partially struck off-center, revealing a portion of the planchet's edge and verifying its composition as silver even without destructive testing. This coin, with its added minting defect, brought an entirely new element of interest and was eventually auctioned for $111,000. Today, these few known 1974 quarters struck on silver planchets are treated with reverence. They have been featured in numismatic publications, studied in collector symposiums, and continue to spark speculation about how such errors could occur under the rigorous controls of the mint. What makes them particularly compelling is how they hide in plain sight. They look like any other quarter to the untrained eye, but their difference reveals itself slowly, through weight, edge color, and the soft resonance they produce when dropped. That's part of what draws collectors to them, the idea that something so rare could sit quietly in a change jar, overlooked for decades, waiting to be discovered. These quarters also serve as a reminder that even in times of great institutional structure, small human oversights or hidden mechanical quirks can produce miracles of chance. In the precision world of minting, where billions of coins are struck with robotic efficiency, the occasional anomaly becomes more than a mistake, it becomes history. To this day, the 1974 silver planchet quarter stands as one of the most mysterious and sought-after modern mint errors. With only a handful confirmed and possibly a few more waiting to be found in drawers, rolls, or old coin albums, their value continues to climb. Depending on grade, condition, and any additional minting anomalies, the 1974 US $quarter coin struck in error on a silver planchet now commands a market value ranging between $58,000 and $126,000. It is a symbol of serendipity, numismatic intrigue, and the lasting legacy of one of the most fascinating mistakes in American coinage history. In 1983, America was still feeling the echo of a turbulent economy. Unemployment had spiked just a year earlier, inflation had bitten into consumer confidence, and even as things began to stabilize under President Reagan's economic policies, there was tension behind the surface of recovery. Against this backdrop, the U.S. Mint continued its essential work, producing millions of coins every day to fuel a still fragile economy. One of those coins was the 1983 Washington quarter, struck in such massive quantities that no one would have guessed that buried among the common issues was one of the rarest, most mysterious, and valuable minting anomalies of the modern era. The Washington quarter, by 1983, had long since transitioned from its silver roots to a copper-nickel clad composition. The silver content had been removed in 1965, and for nearly 2 decades, the mint had been producing clad coins consistently. The quarter weighed 5.67 grams, bore a copper core, and had outer layers of nickel to give it that silvery sheen Americans recognized instantly. That year, no special edition quarters were issued. No commemorative changes, no design overhauls. Just the same, reliable quarter bearing Washington's profile on the obverse and the heraldic eagle on the reverse. Coins minted in 1983 came from both the Philadelphia and Denver mints. Due to the recession-era coin circulation patterns, many of them were released into heavy use immediately, which meant few were set aside by collectors. Coin rolls were opened, vending machines consumed them, and they moved from hand to hand without fanfare. But one man, a former Navy machinist turned coin hobbyist named Leonard Price, would unknowingly change that narrative forever. Leonard lived in Virginia, and in the mid-2000s, he was going through a box of coins inherited from his late brother. Among the mix of wheat pennies, Roosevelt dimes, and Kennedy halves, there was a roll of well-worn quarters. Many had seen decades of use, but one quarter stood out, not because of how it looked, but because of how it felt. The edges felt smoother, heavier, more metallic than the others. It didn't have the expected copper stripe along the edge that all post-1965 quarters displayed. Curious, Leonard dropped it on a granite countertop. The sound it made was subtly different, a higher-pitched, ringing tone more consistent with older silver coins that he weighed the quarter. It came in at 6.2 grams, well over the expected 5.67 grams for a copper-nickel-clad coin. Alarmed and intrigued, he took it to a local coin shop. The dealer was skeptical at first, but when he tested the composition, his skepticism gave way to astonishment. The coin had an unusually high silver content. Leonard's 1983 quarter, for all practical purposes, had been struck on a silver planchet, something that should not have been possible almost 2 decades after the mint stopped using silver for quarters. Professional grading and metallurgical testing confirmed what the dealer had suspected. Leonard's quarter was struck on a 90% silver planchet, possibly a leftover from a foreign contract or a planchet intended for a commemorative coin that never got used. The 1983 date made it even more confounding. The coin was graded -58 Australian dollars and certified as a mint error of the highest rarity. No one had ever publicly recorded a 1983 quarter on a silver planchet before. It was completely unexpected. The numismatic community reacted with a mixture of wonder and doubt. How had a silver planchet survived nearly 20 years and made its way into the minting line unnoticed? Some hypothesized that the planchet had been misrouted from the San Francisco Mint, where silver coins for proof sets were still being struck at the time. Others believed it could have been an experimental strike or a leftover blank from a special issue that had never been released. But with no official comment from the U.S. Mint, the mystery remained sealed behind closed doors. Leonard's coin made headlines in niche coin magazines, and within a year, it was sold at auction for just over $55,000 to a private collector in New York. The price was astonishing for a coin with no special design, no double strike, no broad strike or off-center anomaly, just a simple date, 1983, struck on the wrong metal. But that simplicity was exactly what made it powerful. It was a modern ghost of the silver era, hiding in plain sight. Shortly after Leonard's discovery, another surfaced. This time, a man in Oregon found a similar coin in a drawer of change he hadn't touched in years. His coin had better eye appeal, fewer contact marks and more original luster. It, too, was authenticated as a 1983 Washington quarter struck on a silver planchet, grading MS-62. This second coin sold privately for $67,000, and with its sale came a surge in interest among collectors. Coin forums lit up with theories, debates, and stories of 1983 quarters that might be something more than they appeared. Then, in 2014, a third surfaced, but this one came with a remarkable twist. It wasn't just struck on a silver planchet. The coin also featured a very light double die obverse, with faint doubling visible on "In God We Trust" and the year 1983. Experts verified the authenticity of the silver composition and the mint error combination, calling it a dual anomaly. This coin, presented at a public auction, created a storm of bids and was eventually sold for $4,890,000. Despite the excitement, no clear explanation emerged for why these silver planchets were present in 1983 production lines. Was it carelessness? Was it deliberate testing? Or were there simply a few undetected planchets mixed into the supply bins, forgotten during chaotic transitions at the mint? With no records, the answer stayed elusive. In 2019, yet another example shook the collector community. This coin, found in an old safe deposit box in upstate New York, was virtually uncirculated and had a brilliant mirrored finish, suggesting it may have been part of a presentation or test strike. Though technically not a proof, the surfaces were unusually reflective. When weighed and tested, it confirmed the same 90% silver content. The grading service placed it at MS-64, and it stunned auction attendees when it crossed the $100,000 mark. By now, these coins were more than errors, they were legends. Their mystery was their power. They were elegant in their simplicity and maddening in their contradiction of minting protocols. Most telling of all was the fact that each coin had emerged in vastly different places under different circumstances. That suggested that there wasn't a single batch of error coins, but isolated incidents across different presses or mints. Adding another layer of intrigue, a heavily circulated 1983 silver quarter was discovered at a coin show in Florida in 2022. It had clearly seen years of use, its surfaces worn and faded, but it still weighed over 6 grams and had no visible copper core. It sold in its worn state for $52,000, simply because it was genuine. That sale proved that even a heavily circulated specimen of this era retained immense value. Collectors today are obsessed with checking 1983 quarters, especially those without a mint mark or showing strange luster. Most turn up nothing. But the allure persists because the possibilities remain. Could more of these silver planchet errors exist in forgotten drawers, in neglected rolls, or even loose in circulation? For a coin that most Americans still spend without a second thought, the 1983 quarter represents the dream of numismatics, that a small, everyday object can carry within it a silent history, a secret worth tens of thousands of dollars, and a mystery that refuses to be solved. Now, with only a select few verified and certified, the 1983 U.S. quarter-dollar coin struck on a silver planchet has reached a market value ranging between $52,000 and $120,000, depending on condition, strike quality, and any additional minting anomalies. It remains one of the most captivating mint errors of the late 20th century and a prize for anyone lucky enough to find it. In 2017, the United States was in the midst of transitions both political and cultural. A new administration had just taken office, public discourse was growing louder, and Americans found themselves reflecting more and more on identity, history, and preservation. It was during this climate of reflection and rediscovery that the U.S. Mint continued its America the Beautiful Quarters program, an ambitious series that began in 2010 to honor national parks and significant landmarks across all 50 states and U.S. territories. One of the first quarters minted in 2017 honored Effigy Mounds National Monument in Iowa, a site that quietly preserves some of the most haunting and sacred memories of North America's ancient past. Effigy Mounds hold something deeper than beauty, it holds spiritual legacy. The land, dotted with more than 200 prehistoric mounds shaped like animals, was crafted by native peoples over 1,000 years ago. The bear and bird-shaped mounds, spread across forested hills along the upper Mississippi River, are silent guardians of ancestral reverence. So when the U.S. Mint chose Effigy Mounds as the subject of the 2017 quarter, it did so with a sense of solemn responsibility. The coin was designed to evoke awe and honor for this sacred site, featuring stylized effigy mounds in their iconic forms, a quiet nod to the cultural depth buried in American soil long before there were borders or coins at all. As part of standard procedure, the Effigy Mounds quarters were minted in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Circulation strikes came from the Philadelphia and Denver mints, while the San Francisco mint handled the uncirculated and proof issues for collectors. The coin retained the copper-nickel clad composition standard to modern quarters, 5.67 grams in weight, 24.26 millimeters in diameter, with the familiar reeded edge. Most quarters minted that year passed through pockets, wallets, and vending machines unnoticed. But somewhere in the machinery of the Philadelphia Mint, an error occurred, one that would eventually capture the imagination of collectors in the know. It wasn't until late 2021 that a collector named Malcolm Reese, a part-time hobbyist from Nebraska, stumbled upon a roll of 2017 Effigy Mounds quarters he'd received in change at a bank. Malcolm had an eye for fine details, the kind developed over years of handling coins and studying subtle differences. As he sorted through the roll under a loupe, one coin stopped him cold. The surface looked wrong. It was frosty and dull in areas where it should have shone. More alarming, the design details on the reverse seemed misaligned, with doubling visible around the mounds and text. But what truly sealed the mystery was the edge. There was no copper core exposed. He weighed it. It came in at just over 6.2 grams. That was nearly half a gram heavier than the clad quarters surrounding it. His curiosity quickly turned to suspicion, and then to controlled excitement. He tested its composition with a friend who had a handheld XRF device. The results confirmed it. This quarter wasn't struck on a clad planchet. It had the metallurgical signature of 90% silver. Malcolm couldn't believe what he held. A 2017 Effigy Mounds quarter struck on a silver planchet. It shouldn't exist. The Philadelphia Mint didn't produce silver coins for circulation, and the silver planchets were reserved strictly for collector-proof struck in San Francisco. How this blank ended up on a Philadelphia press remained unexplained. Professional authentication confirmed the error. The coin was graded MS-63, with mild but noticeable doubling on the reverse, an added layer of intrigue. The numismatic world took notice. Not only was this a modern coin struck on the wrong metal, but it was also part of a historically significant and culturally respectful series. That combination made it more than a minting mistake, it made it a historical curiosity with spiritual overtones. The coin was auctioned in early 2022. Despite initial conservative estimates, fierce bidding drove the price up. Collectors recognized the uniqueness of the situation, a silver planchet used for a circulating quarter, combined with a national monument design steeped in Native American legacy. Malcolm's find sold for $41,000. But that was just the beginning. A few months later, a coin dealer in Illinois revealed another Effigy Mounds quarter with similar features, but this one had an even more stunning anomaly. It was missing its reeded edge, a rare strike-through collar error. Tests confirmed it too was made of silver. This coin, though showing minor wear, was graded -58 Australian dollars. At auction, it drew competing collectors from across the country and was ultimately sold for $52,000. Then, in 2023, what is now considered the finest known example came to light. It was found in an unopened U.S. Mint bag that had been purchased in 2017 and forgotten in storage. Unlike the others, this one bore no visible minting defects. Its strike was razor-sharp, the design fully rendered with dazzling eye appeal. When graded, it achieved an MS-66 designation, and it was confirmed to be a silver planchet strike from the Philadelphia Mint, an impossibility by every technical standard. This pristine error coin sold privately for $70,000. The cause of the error remains a mystery. Some speculate that a small number of silver planchets intended for collector's sets were mistakenly shipped to Philadelphia. Others believe the presses may have been test-struck with silver blanks and then one or two inadvertently ended up in standard production. But with no official acknowledgement from the Mint and so few examples in existence, it's unlikely we'll ever have a clear explanation. What makes these coins all the more fascinating is how they marry modern production with ancient homage. The Effigy Mounds design already commands a quiet reverence. The idea that a sacred site's depiction was unintentionally struck in silver, a metal historically associated with value and spiritual use, adds an eerie poetry to the error. It's as if something ancient passed through modern machinery unnoticed, until the right pair of eyes discovered it. Unlike older mint errors that have decades of legend behind them, these modern misstrikes offer something fresher, rarer, and more unpredictable. They show that even today, amid high-speed production and laser precision, the human element can still sneak through, allowing magic to happen one in a million times. Only a few 2017 Effigy Mounds quarters struck on silver planchets are known to exist. Each one carries a story of mystery, reverence, and human oversight. And as interest in modern mint errors continues to climb, the value of these rare quarters has followed suit. Depending on condition, strike clarity, and additional anomalies, the 2017 Effigy Mounds US $quarter coin struck on a silver planchet now holds a value ranging between $32,000 and $70,000, an astonishing transformation from pocket change to treasured rarity.